we lived at 462 Alabama Street, and the Presleys were our downstairs neighbors, and because we were basically at the same address, I had the rather unique distinction of having Elvis's address on my birth certificate. There aren't too many people who can say that.
Elvis was just a life changer. He played this music that our parents hated, which was great.
One day, my dad saw this young man looking in the window. He said, "Come on in, young man, let me show you around." And this timid young man said, "Mr. Lansky, I don't have any money, but one of these days I'm going to come in and buy you out." And my dad said, "Young man, don't buy me out, just buy from me." And that's what started their lifelong relationship.
Whatever it was, and all the equipment, all the animals, and all the everything, and you also have to be out of there by 7 o'clock tonight because I'm having a party there. And so if you look at the piece of paper, if you look at the document, up on the side is a little rider that went along with the contract, and it lists all of the furniture and all the animals. He had peacocks and stuff like that. And Elvis made him leave everything there.
Good afternoon. I'm Lorraine Wolf, along with Phyllis Groskin. We are the programming chairmen for the Jewish Historical Society. We would like to welcome everyone to the final 2017-2018 Sumner Levine Speaker Program entitled Elvis and the Jewish Connection. We're thrilled to have Larry Moss here to moderate the program and share some of his Elvis memorabilia. Larry is an Elvis enthusiast, a noted memorabilia collector, and the community is very fortunate to have Larry, who is always willing to step up and share his knowledge. Our guests today include the following: Chaim Fruchter of Baltimore, son of the late Rabbi Alfred Fruchter, who was Elvis's neighbor in the 1950s. Hal Lansky, son of the late Bernard Lansky and principal in the Lansky clothing businesses and clothier for Elvis and other entertainers. David Fleischman, who is the lead singer in the Memphis Casuals and later Flash in the board of directors and played at Elvis's house parties. At the end, we're going to hear from Diane McNeil, one of the founders of the Unknown Child Foundation, who educates audiences about the 1.5 million children who perished in the Holocaust. So please welcome Larry to start moderating. More chairs are coming.
They're putting them out in the back.
Okay, the insurance carrier can breathe their breath now. My name's Larry Moss, and as Lorraine said, I get to be the moderator this evening or this afternoon. A couple of weeks ago, Lorraine and some other folks visited our stuff, Judy and I. Judy, I think, is back here somewhere. And in the course of looking around and seeing some of the items that we have gotten to collect over the years, she asked if I would be on the panel. And I kind of hemmed and hawed a little bit, and said, oh, come on, it'll be fun, it'll be fun. I said, okay, great. Then a couple of weeks later, an email goes out, and the panelists are Hal, Chaim, David, and the moderator is me. I sent her an email, I said, either I've been promoted to number 1 or I stepped to number 2. I'm not really sure. But at any rate, I have a lot of relationship with Hal. I've known Hal forever and then some time. I have met David. I actually hired him one time way back in 1967 when Shea Marie was at the old Baron Hirsch, and Flash and his band played for us that year. And Chaim, we exchanged an email and a telephone call, and that's been about the extent of it. But with that, I'm supposed to at least introduce each of our speakers. What we'll do is go through each one of the folks. We've got little presentations, some information, and I'll come back up and talk about the stuff on the table over there. And then we'll open the floor to questions. And when it comes to the questions, We'll be glad to let anyone ask any questions that they want. All you have to do is write it on the back of a $100 bill, fold it up like an airplane, and fly it over on the stage, and then we'll answer all your questions. So, with that, we'll kind of turn this thing over. First, I'd like to introduce Chaim Fruchter, our herald. As Lorraine said, he now lives in Silver Springs, Maryland, but he was born here in Memphis in 1952 and lived here until 1955. And his dad was the rabbi at the old Beth Elam. In the late 40s and 50s, that was the synagogue to go to. And Chaim, like I said, his father was the head rabbi. They also lived on Alabama Street on the second floor of an apartment, and the people that lived on the bottom floor happened to be the Presleys. Most people don't know this, but Chaim is a guitarist, a wedding singer or whatever, so he has a musical talent of his own. And it's my understanding that when he was just 2 years old and Elvis was a teenager at the time, this again was 1953, 54, 55. No, I got a secret I got to tell you. That's my understanding. This, you know how it is with legends and stories about Elvis, and everybody's got their encounter. But at 2 years old, Elvis gave him singing guitar lessons in exchange for Chaim teaching Elvis how to dial and how to play the I introduced Chaim to entertain us.
Thank you. I might be a little taller than everyone else who's spoken so far. Okay. Anyway, thank you for having me here. It's really great to be here. It's been a long, long time. But I'm not going to talk about 1952 right away. I'm talking about 1991. The year was 1991. It was a lazy Sunday morning, and our oldest daughter, who was 12 at the time, was upstairs in her room reading a book. All of a sudden, I hear her yelling from upstairs, "Abba, Abba, Dad, come up quick, quick!" So I ran upstairs to see what the problem was. And she showed me this book she was reading. If I can get this to work. Ryan? Oh, sorry. He asked for a little advance notice, and I gave him none. All Shook Up by Elizabeth Leedy, a book she randomly picked up at the library, juvenile fiction, about a girl who dated Elvis. So she showed me where on page 45 it said, it's a little hard to read, so I'll read off my paper here. It says, he, that is Elvis, took the steps outside his house 2 at a time, almost running into Mrs. Fruchter, their upstairs neighbor. Sorry, ma'am. That's the extent of my Elvis imitation. He mumbled quickly. I said, whoa, that's amazing. So my daughter and I looked at the, you can cut this off now. My daughter and I looked at the introduction to the book, where the author says the following. All the conversations and action of the story are fiction. However, certain details are taken from Elvis's life. He did shop at Lansky's. He did graduate from Hughes. Elvis had the courage to change the way he looked before he got famous. He had a sense of himself that couldn't be denied. He knew that a barbershop would not be able to cut his hair the way he wanted, so he went to a beauty parlor. In 1954, he did go to Memphis Recording Service and Sun Records to see what he sounded like. The receptionist there thought there was something special in the way he sounded. She played it for her boss, Sam Phillips. A while later, Sam Phillips called Elvis's upstairs neighbor, Rabbi Fruchter. Elvis did not have a phone. And the rest is history. So, I'm the son of Rabbi and Mrs. Alfred and Jeanette Fruchter, who lived in Memphis in the late 40s and early 50s. My father was a rabbi at Beth Elam from 1945 to 1954. My parents married in 1947, and I and 3 of my 4 siblings were born here. Don't I sound like it? Right? We lived at 462 Alabama Street, and the Presleys were our downstairs neighbors. And because we were basically at the same address, I had the rather unique distinction of having Elvis's address on my birth certificate. There aren't too many people who can say that. Elvis was 17 when I was born, and I was assured by my mother that did in fact hold me as a baby, and she was pretty sure he asked to carry me up the stairs when I was brought home from the hospital. She couldn't promise that, but she thought so. Anyway, growing up, we thought this was extremely cool. Brian, I'm sorry, I didn't do one more. We thought this was extremely cool that we were Elvis's neighbors. And And we would tell our friends or some friends, and they would say, oh yeah, right, sure. And we had nothing to prove it really, until about 20 years ago, one of my nieces was visiting my aunt in Chicago. And my aunt says, oh, here's some old photos that your mother might want. And all of a sudden my aunt hears this scream from my niece because she found this picture among the bunch. And this is Elvis and his cousin, and my older brother and sister as toddlers. Okay? This was probably taken in 1953. And by the way, Larry, I do have the original, so if you want to negotiate a deal, we'll okay, you can turn off, thank you. I wish I could say I remember Elvis, but I don't, since we left Memphis when I was 2. Not surprisingly, my parents were not huge fans of his music. So my wife and I have 4 grown children, and we like a lot of the same music that they do. But back then, rock and roll was a bunch of noise to the generation of the parents. I'm sure many people in this room remember Alan Sherman, right? Hello, Mother, Hello, Father. He had a parody song of Pop Goes the Weasel called, anybody remember? Pop hates the Beatles. Right? So, but because of that, my parents didn't really follow his career all that much, though I do remember being taken, I'm not sure if it was by my parents or someone else, to see either Blue Hawaii or G.I. Blues when I was a kid. If you've ever seen those movies, I mean, judging by the content, it was probably G.I. Blues, but I don't know. Anyway. My mother had very fond feelings for Elvis. My siblings and I noted that whenever she would talk about him, she would really be teary-eyed. She was just so emotionally taken by him. She would say, oh, he was such a fine boy and so respectful. It was terrible what happened to him in his later years. And she, my mother, attributed much of his decline to the early death of Elvis's mother, Gladys, at age 46, in 1958. My mother and Gladys would often have coffee together, and Gladys Presley told my mother that she'd hoped her son would become a physician. My mother gave her blessings to Gladys, saying that Elvis would make a mark on the world no matter what he did. It may have been my mother's nice way of telling her that she didn't think Elvis was physician material, I don't know, but my mother was certainly correct about his having made a mark on the world. Knowing how much Elvis loved clothes, my mother bought him a set of onyx cufflinks for his high school graduation, which earned her a big hug from the king. Perhaps the most fascinating incident is when he made his first record, That's All Right, Mama, and knocked on the door and asked to borrow our phonograph. And my mother said that she could hear that record playing all day long. I guess he liked it. My parents were not well off, but apparently the Presleys had less than we did. And I know there were times when my parents did loan them money. And apparently there was some time where a certain utility bill needed to be paid, and by a certain time the Presleys couldn't make it. And my father said to have the bill sent to him, and he would take care of it. And there's a pretty well-known story, and I've heard different versions of this story about Elvis having donated a lot of money to some Jewish organization in Memphis, giving the reason the kindness is shown to his family by my parents. So probably people in this room know a lot more about that than I do. Albert Goldman, who authored an Elvis biography in 1981, contacted my parents for an interview. In that book, he noted my father's love for cantorial music. My father was a cantor as well as a rabbi. And the author surmised that Elvis might have heard the strains of cantorial music coming out of the windows of our house as he was washing his car. And the author wrote, Albert Goldman wrote, quote, in all the digging around for the roots of the Presley sound, no one has ever considered the possibility that he was influenced by Jewish cantorial singing. Now, Mr. Goldman never told my father he was going to make that suggestion. And my father was pretty upset about it. Basically saying, how dare he put Elvis's music in the great Chazanim, the great cantors of Europe, even in the same sentence. But who knows, it's possible. As probably many of you know, Elvis did serve as our Shabbos goy at times, and to say right now, we do not use the term goy in any pejorative or negative way, but Shabbos goy is an idiom that describes a non-Jewish person who helps Sabbath-observant Jews do things that they cannot do on the Sabbath, on Shabbos. Just as an aside, this is not a blanket permission for this to happen. There are certain conditions that should be met. Anyway, he did do this for us, and he also has some Shabbos meals with us, which of course brings us to the subject of, was Elvis Jewish? Biographer Elaine Dundee, in her book Elvis and Gladys, discovered that Elvis's maternal great-grandmother, Nancy Burdine, was Jewish. I'm reading from her book now. Nancy Burdine was married to Abner Tackett. Nancy was of particular interest to Gladys, Elvis's mother, for her Jewish heritage, often remembering Nancy's sons for their Jewish names, Sidney and Jerome. Nancy and Abner had a daughter named Martha, who married White Netzel, and the daughter was named Octavia, nicknamed Doll, was Elvis's maternal grandmother. This, of course, would make Elvis Jewish by Jewish law, since we go by matrilineal descent. I don't know if it's possible to disprove this idea, but I can tell you that my parents had not even an iota of thought that Elvis could possibly be Jewish. In all the conversations that my mother had with Gladys, and all the times as he served at her Shabbos Goy, it never came up that he might be Jewish, or even have any Jewish family. My parents would, of course, be horrified if they knew there was even one small chance that he might be Jewish and he was doing these things on Shabbat, Shabbos for them. There was a documentary in 2002 called Elvis. Anybody seen that movie? Great name, right? So, Elvis, that's with the S-C-H, okay? And the filmmakers set out to explore the king's Jewish roots, so they found an Orthodox Jewish Elvis impersonator from, I think, Montreal, named Dan Hartel, whose stage name was Schmelvis. And they went on some odyssey to Israel, and they planted a tree in Elvis's memory, and then they went to Graceland and said, Kaddish. If you end up ever seeing this movie, you can see my mother in this movie. There was an article written by Howard Morton several months ago called Elvis, the Disappearing Jew. Intriguing title. In this article, the author notes that Elvis was our Shabbos Goy as a way of showing how far Elvis strayed from his Judaism. He wonders if Elvis had lived longer, would he have found his way back to Judaism? Could he have possibly channeled his love for music into the world of the Torah? My wife and I got married in August 1977. We really thought about inviting Elvis to our wedding. We figured he would still fondly remember my parents, and remember that he held me as a baby. And since I was, and still am, the singer in a Jewish wedding band, I could actually play guitar with Elvis. Now, I always imagined how that would go. Like, would I transliterate Simon Tov Mazel Tov for him? Like, who would sing melody and who would sing harmony, you know? It was an amazing fantasy, but we just figured there was no way he would actually ever see this invitation. We would mail it to some publicist or who knows what, and we just didn't really think that he would realistically ever see it. Turns out he died a week before our wedding, so the whole thing obviously became moot. A phrase that's commonly used in life is, what's the take-home? Aren't we meant to learn life lessons from the things that happen to us and different events? I think that's what Mr. Morton was going for in his article. One take-home for me from this my whole family's relationship with Elvis and his family is how we as Jews relate to other people, especially people of other faiths. The idea that Elvis would donate a lot of money to a Jewish cause based on how he was treated by a Jewish family years ago is huge. And we as Jews have to always realize that we are representatives of all Jews, and whatever we do reflects either positively or negatively on everybody. My family moved to California in 1955, and my father saw Elvis only one more time. He went to see Elvis in a concert in Oakland or San Francisco, either in the late 50s, maybe around 1960. Somehow my father got the security guard to go backstage and tell Elvis that he was here. And Elvis said, oh, yeah, we used to live underneath him, and we used to loan me money, and sometimes he'd have me turn the lights on Saturday. And Elvis came out and introduced him to everybody, gave him a big hug. And my father said that he used to call him sometimes Sir Rabbi. When people who don't know me from before hear I'm from Memphis, they sometimes say, oh, I heard Elvis was a Shabbos Goy for an Orthodox rabbi down there. I say, yeah, that happens to be true. And of course, they're astounded when I tell them, but as cool as that is, I think it pales in comparison to what else my parents accomplished in this community. In the late 1940s, my father recognized the effects of assimilation and the rising rate of intermarriage. And he understood that the best way to deal with this was through Jewish education and founding of a Jewish day school. So he was one of the major founders of the Memphis Hebrew Academy and was the principal without pay from 1949 to 1952. And my mother, who never learned to drive, would go door to door, ringing bells, trying to raise money for the school, and she raised more money than anyone else for the first banquet. So that was amazing. And that legacy still lives on, obviously. God somehow arranged that my parents' path and the Presleys would cross, and my parents took the opportunity to turn that into what we call a Kiddush Hashem. This is a sanctification of God's name in the world. Not through any big idea of destiny, that's just the way they live. That was their life. And obviously it made an impression on young Elvis Presley. And he saw the need for Jewish education and answered the call with hard work and dedication. And all these things serve as a great inspiration to me and my family, and I would hope to you as well. Just to close, I want to say that Brian wants to get behind me, thanks. I want to say that in some way we did actually have Elvis with us for Passover this year. No, not really, but I'll show you in a minute. So, yeah, thank you. So I'm a big fan of puns and wordplay. And you know, on Passover, we put away the chametz food and the dishes, and we close up those cabinets. We don't open them for the entire 8 days of Passover. So I like wordplay, I like puns. So instead of just closing up these cabinets, I make signs on the cabinets to indicate which ones have the chametz in them. And I pick a theme every year. So for example, and I make signs on these cabinets. So for example, last year, I turned 64, and all the signs had songs of Beatles songs theme. So for example, I had a sign that said, "Yesterday I beat, today I can't." Or, "There's comments in here, just let it be." Or, "Do you want to know a secret? There's comments in here." And then 8 days this week, no comments. So this year, in honor of this program, I decided to do signs rather with Elvis song and movie themes. So I'm going to show you what I did here. All right, so we have "Don't Open This Cabinet." "Burning Love." Oh no, we'll get that later. It's a matter of time. I'll do that one first. 8 days, that's when you can open this. "Hound dog." "Hot dog, yes. Bun, no." "Jailhouse Rock." "This comments needs to stay locked up." "Stay away, Joe." That's kind of self-explanatory. "Burning Love." How about burning comments? And finally, Elvis sings. Well, you can't really see it, but "Clean up your own backyard," or how about "Clean up your own chametz?" Anyway, thank you so much for listening. It's been great to be back, and I hope I can come again.
The business side of music, and became the local promotions director for Atlantic Records. In 1977, he was promoted to regional director and moved to Dallas. In '83, he was promoted to director of national album promotions and moved to New York. In 1986, he got another promotion as a senior director for national album promotions. In 1990, he left Atlantic and went to work for MCA and became the vice president of rock promotions. In 1997, he left MCA and formed his own independent promotions company, David Fleshman Promotions, which he still runs. In 2004, he moved back to Memphis. He was immediately elected to the Board of Governors for the local NARIS chapter. And in 2006, David and his partner John Scott, a Memphis DJ that you might remember, formed a company called allmemphismusic.com, and it was an internet radio station, and it plays all Memphis music. In 2008 to 2011, he served on the board of the local NARIS in a variety of positions, all the way up to vice president. In 2011, he was elected to the board of the Rock and Soul Museum, and he's also co-partners in Right Way Entertainment, an artist management company. Ladies and gentlemen, David Flash.
I got tired just listening to all this. First of all, let me clear something up in the initial introduction. That we're talking about is performing for Elvis at his house. We never really performed at his house. I've been to the house 3 times, 4 times maybe. 3 times people come in and they want to go to Graceland. And but the first time I ever went to Graceland was in somewhere in the 60s. There was an English band called the Zombies. There's a bunch of hits you might remember. and they wanted to go to Graceland, so I was the one that took them. Elvis was in LA making movies, so basically we walked up to the door and they said, Elvis isn't here, and we turned around and left. But my first sort of Elvis connection, not being the mother, I might not be 100% correct on this, but I believe now when you give birth, they run you out of the hospital the next day or something. I think when I was born, Moby Dick was still a minnow. I think they allowed the moms to stay for 2 or 3 days, which they did, and I was born at the old St. Joseph Hospital, which is part of, I'll say everybody now, so know what it is. And when they did let my mom bring me home, my mom and dad, we moved into the Lauderdale courts, which many of you know, Elvis eventually and his family, his mom and dad eventually lived there. Catty corner to the Lauderdale courts, my cousin's in the audience, Teresa Case Kaplan, or Teresa Kaplan Case, as my mom's sister's husband. They owned a grocery store at 2nd and Winchester. Now this is not the Winchester way out south, this is where the freeway kind of goes over 2nd Street. They rearranged it, and I think it's a pumping station or something now. And I do know that the Presleys, from a financial standpoint, weren't having the easiest time, and Bobby and Uncle Jack extended credit to the Presley family. And so that was the earliest stuff. Then I started playing music. In 1961, I got in a band that was made up of mostly Jewish kids. I don't know if Randy Haskell made it today or not, but it was actually Randy's kind of band, and David Freener, and Dr. Lester Hoffman's son, who's Elvis's dentist, Gary, was our bass player, and we had a guy named Terry Pond do backup, only because he could do things like put in doorbells, and he could fix equipment and stuff. So yeah, sure, you could be in a band. So we did that, and we had a tremendous amount of success. You know, you start when I was 15 years old, I couldn't even drive to band practice. But you had, you had what we could, every Friday and Saturday. Kids didn't, you didn't do things during the week in those days. So it started out, you're working a couple of Friday and Saturdays a month, and then it's 3 or 4, and then it's 5 or 6, and then you're working all the time. And we were very blessed and fortunate to be successful in that respect. And it was mentioned earlier, George had his own talent party all the time, and we had a little run for a couple of 3 years where we were on every other week. And I don't care what you're doing, if you're on TV, people know you. So it just increased the visibility and the popularity of the band. And here's where the Elvis part comes in. A man that I consider my mentor, and a man that I can never repay for everything he's done for me. His name is George Klein. George used to come down to the Thunderbird Lounge, where we were the house band for 3 years. It was in the basement of what was then the Shelbourne Apartments, Manassas and Adams, and it was just the perfect storm. To me, I always felt that the Thunderbird was the first club. It wasn't coming from a rural status, if you would. Jay and I, my wife, we were talking this morning about Hernando's Hideaway, that some of you might remember. The Whirlaway and the Vapors, and of course you had the stuff over in West Memphis, Danny's and the Cotton Club and the guy. So the thing just exploded in popularity. Monday, for the first 6 months, we worked Tuesday through Saturday. And Tuesdays were really good. That's a night that nobody goes out. We'll be a good little crowd. Wednesdays was crowded, Thursdays was packed, and Friday and Saturdays was stupid with so many people in there. And it was at that time in American history, so we all had a really good time. We'll just leave it at that. And you can make of it what you like. And so one of the people that would come down on a regular basis was George. Also, I got in the record business and as a promotion person, and promotion people would come into Memphis, and they would take George out, and they would take Roy Mack, who was at WMPS, and you did what you did, and you try to convince them to play your records. That was the job of a promotion person. So George started coming down, and he got brought down times by, national promotion people. And then when Elvis, he made his movies in California, and then when he came back, everybody calls it the Memphis Mafia. I never did. To me, it's the guys. Because that's what they were, Elvis and the guys. And George started bringing them down. It was Richard Davis and Charlie Hodge and Red West and Sonny West and probably even somebody. Oh, and of course a nice Jewish boy by the name of Alan Fortas. And talking to Alan one night, and he says, "Man, you need to come to the movies." And I'm looking at him like he's crazy. Now my lifestyle was I got up late in the morning, possibly early in the afternoon. I was up all night. To me, you went to the movies like on the weekends during the day, and at night, and during the week, if you went, you just didn't go between 9 and 1 when we were playing. And I looked at Alan and I said, "What movies?" And he goes, "Well, you know what, man, when Elvis is when we're back home, he'll rent the Minty, and they'll show movies." And he said, "You're more than welcome to come." I said, "Well, how do I know if you're doing it?" So he gives me the number to Graceland, and he says, "Just call and ask. Ask for me, and find the time for going." So I started going to the movies, and that's where we sort of met. Never officially introduced, but he knew me because we watched Talent Party, as probably 80% of the people in Memphis did. They had huge ratings. So he knew who I was. Obviously, I knew who he was. And when he got up, I assumed to go to the bathroom. I was standing out in the lobby, and we sort of kind of nodded, "Hey, how you doing? Nice to see you," kind of thing. And then Alan was telling me, "You need to come to the fairgrounds. We went to the fairgrounds." I said, "What are you talking about?" He said, "Elvis will rent the fairgrounds, and there'll be whatever, 20 of us, and we'll just do whatever we want to do." I said, "Well, that sounds like fun, especially to like a 21-year-old kid." So I did that, and I was a big fan of what they call the Dodgems. I don't know if everybody's from here, you remember that. If not, the bumper cars, so you know what I'm talking about. So I'm riding around. Unbeknownst to me, Elvis and the guys considered themselves a team against everybody else. I had no clue. So I'm riding around, and if you ever remember those things, they had a big, thick steering wheel. I'm riding around, and there's a rubber tire, and I come around, and there he is. 25 feet in front of me is Elvis Presley. And he's looking back over his shoulder, and he's looking at me with that snarl lip and that smile that we've seen a million times. And he knows exactly what he's doing, which is messing with me. He knew that I did not know what to do. Did he hit him? Am I going to blow this? If I hit him, he's going to tell me you're no longer welcome. And he knew it. And he was just laughing and smiling, and the next thing I know, Red West hit me, stood up in his own car and hit me from behind so hard, threw me forward, my elbow hit that big steering wheel and hurt. Of course, it wasn't cool and not anybody see that it hurt, but it hurt. So I did that. I went to movies with him a lot. We saw a lot of movies. The only negative was if we were watching a movie and Elvis didn't like it, he snapped his fingers and they stopped the movie. And he stopped one that I really wanted to see. Saw a movie that was, I think it was called A Company of Cowards. But by the time it was released, it was called Advance to the Rear. Maybe it was vice versa. It was like a comedy, western kind of deal. So we had this 3-year gig at the Thunderbird, and all of Elvis's guys were coming down there. And Elvis had New Year's Eve parties. I remember he had some at the house. He did, I had gone to the Manhattan Club out in Bellevue, Willie Mitchell and Four Kings. And, things were going so well at the Thunderbird that the guys talked him into coming down, and so he rented the Thunderbird for New Year's Eve, December 31st, 1967. And paid us pretty good money to do it, as a matter of fact. And so people ask me all the time, were you nervous? And I said, well, yeah, for a minute. I mean, I walk out on the stage, our band, and then there's, you know, as close as this table, there's Elvis and Priscilla and Lamar and I forget, Charlie and whoever else was at this table. And it kind of hit me. And so I was a little nervous, I guess is a good word. But when you play music, you tend to lose yourself in the music, and you're not thinking about that's Elvis Presley or that's a cousin about Jimmy or any of that. You just get lost, and you want to be part of this ensemble that's creating the sound called music that hopefully moves people. So we performed, and we played from 9 to 1 at 12 o'clock off Champagne Course. The stage was about, I don't know, 2 feet high enough where I could kind of see over everybody. And it was amazing because the men's room and the women's room were like right next to each other. And so whenever Elvis got up to go to the bathroom, all these women got up and were going down the bathroom. And you know what? Some men did the same thing, which is part of his success. Women went nuts over him, and men loved him too. And sometimes that doesn't always happen. So B.J. Thomas at the time was living in Memphis and recording over at American Recording Studio with Chips, as I was. And we became friends. And so we got B.J. to come down that night and sat in. And he really liked B.J. B.J.'s a great singer. We had a really good band, but B.J.'s a great singer. And I could tell he really appreciated B.J. as an artist. And so that was it. Night was over. I go out through the kitchen because I lived above the bandstand. They couldn't rent it to anyone else because they played so late. So I got a deal on an apartment right above the bandstand. And I'm going through the kitchen to go up the back way to go to my apartment. And there's Elvis and Priscilla, and he's dangling the keys up. And I just nodded and kept on going. I had other things to do. And I always assumed that they probably had a few cocktails and they were discussing who was going to drive. I don't know what it was with that. And they must have liked it because they rented the Thunderbird again December 31st, 1968, going into 69. And same thing. I mean, it's Elvis, yes, and all that, but we just wanted to play and sound good. We wanted to groove, man. We wanted to feel that music. That's what you do when you play music. You play to entertain people, but you play some for yourself. You know, like painting or writing a book. You're part of an ensemble that's creating this sound, this music. So we rented the club again, and we played the second New Year's Eve, and it was very similar to the first one. Elvis laughed, everybody else laughed. Elvis went to the bathroom, people got up and went to the bathroom, and all that. Well, the third year, they did not rent, or he and Priscilla did not rent the Thunderbird. They rented a place called TJ's at Herbie O'Malley. Some people out here know Herbie. Herbie owned a place called TJ's, and the house band was a guy by the name of Ronnie Millsap. Now, this was before Ronnie Millsap became a country artist. He was doing blues and rhythm and blues. And, I mean, Ronnie was an exceptional talent. But they hired us to come play after we played at the Thunderbird. So, you know, it's 1969, I'm 23. My guitar player is 20 years older than me, he's probably 24. But we were all in that 22, 23, 24, 25. Doing things that people at that age did in 1969. So we get to the TJ's after playing at the Thunderbird, and we're all feeling great, to say the least. Well, unbeknownst to me, my guitarist, Tony O'Terry, bet my saxophone player, Robert Gladney, that he wouldn't cut in on Elvis and Priscilla when they were dancing. I had no clue. I was standing around doing kissing with somebody, and I looked, and I see Robert go tap Elvis on the shoulder to dance with his wife. And I'm like, well, there's that. I was sort of the connection. I was the only one I went to the movies. The other guys didn't get involved in that. And I said, well, that's blows that. But actually, nothing was ever said. But I felt all of these years that I felt I needed to apologize to Priscilla. So about whenever they opened the guest house, I was invited out to take part in all that stuff. And so I went to Priscilla. And I introduced myself and said, I don't know if you remember me or not, but I've got the band. I told her the story, and I said, man, I've been carrying for 47 years and apologized that I really, it would make me feel better, and I had told the story to people, not a whole lot, but I told the story before, and they go, I shall never remember that. I said, you're out of your mind. How many times do you think somebody tapped Elvis Presley on the shoulder to cut in and dance with Priscilla? So I went through the whole story, and I said, man, I just want to apologize. I said, I get it off my bucket list, get it off my back. And she's a very, very sweet woman. And the truth of the matter is she acted like she didn't remember us saying. So. But that was it. You know, I played for him. I went to the movies with him. I went to the fairgrounds with him. I was really good friends. Richard Davis was one of the guys who, after he left working for Elvis, became a promotion person for Warner Brothers Records. And that was my sister company. I worked for Atlantic, corporately owned by Warner Communications, but a completely separate company. And so, I still maintained a relationship with a lot of those guys, and still extremely close with George Klein. And there are not many of that original bunch left. And I don't know how anyone else feels, but I mean, Elvis was just a life changer. He played this music that our parents hated, which was great. And just the same way that the popular music of today, I'm not the biggest fan of, but it's not made for me. And so, once you accept that's the way it is, that's the way it is. So anyways, that's it. That's kind of my story. That's my sort of interaction with Elvis. I guess there'll be some questions later. But I like to hear
stories about Elvis, and I'm sure if you went around the room, everybody's got one. Everybody saw him this place, or met him at that place, or whatever, or worked someplace where he was. We all have the Elvis stories, and I've got a few about them. But the man who really has Elvis stories has got to be Hal. Hal's the guy, okay? Lansky Brothers was founded 72 years ago in 1946, right after the war, up in Oregon, guy Lansky. Lansky Brothers now has 4 stores in the Peabody Hotel alone, and there's an entire entertainment complex in the original building that's at the corner of Beale and 2nd Street. It houses the Hard Rock Cafe, the Memphis Music Hall of Fame, and the Lansky Brothers Clothier to the King's shop. Hal was born here in Memphis and has lived here all of his life except for a few short weeks when he went off to school somewhere and when he went to get married to his lovely wife, Jerry. Hal is now the 2nd generation of owners of the conglomerate known as Lansky Brothers Clothing Stores. And he and his daughter Julie, which by the way is generation 3 now, have maintained that cutting edge position of fashion in Memphis. And now, they not only have it here in Memphis, they now have an internet presence where again the Lansky name shines. The link to Lansky's and the contributions that Lansky's made to Elvis are irrefutable. They alone are responsible for the style that became identified with the, in those days, young man, but now the king of rock and roll. That's not the only person that they clothed. And Hal gave me a list, and it's all that's right here, so I'm not going to stand here and read them all, but you virtually can't mention or name in the music world or anything associated with Memphis that Lansky's hasn't had something to do with or contributed to. Lansky's as a name for 70 years has been A, mainstay and a treasure on Beale Street, B, leaders and innovators in the clothing fashions in the city of Memphis, C, the acknowledged backbone of the style that became the look of Elvis Presley, and most importantly, Hal and his family have been the greatest ambassadors for this city of Memphis, and they are to this day. And with that, it's my pleasure to introduce a friend of mine for over 50 years, my buddy, Hal Young.
Yeah, better. Brian, why don't you just better. All right, well, this is our store. It was our store. It is our store. 126 Bill. And I'd like to start out and tell the story how my dad started out. In 1946, he and his brother were looking to get into some kind of business, so they couldn't find a place anywhere, so their dad, S.L. Lansky, loaned them $125 to get started. So they found this space, and the only reason they got this space was the man was murdered in this store. Mr. Polsky, he's buried out at the Bear Cemetery. You might have some relatives in this audience, but it had I guess it had a voodoo or nobody wanted it. Karma, nobody wanted it. So they moved, they got in the door, and first thing when they got in the door, they found out it was a ladies' resale thrift shop. And if y'all know my dad, you know, he was a character. He said, "Oh, this ain't me." So he threw that stuff out on the street. You know, Bill Street was kind of busy. So within hours, all that stuff disappeared, and they had to get rid of it. So they needed to sell something. So 1946, the war was over. So Army Depot out off of Airways, you know, they supplied the troops all over the world. So you know, war is over. So my dad, if you notice on the building, there was Army surplus, pants, somewhere paints, jewelry, Army cots. They sold everything. In a couple of years after that, you know, the stuff was drying out. Everywhere was selling the same stuff, and they had to start selling something. So he went into high fashion. But the next clip, and of course this is a picture of my dad. And I'm going to kind of get off the subject a little. And you know, Beale Street was like Memphis's. It was just a street for African Americans, and if you were white, you did not go down on that street. A lot of Jewish merchants. The Jewish merchants had the pawn shop. You had the hardware stores. They had it all. You had the juke joints. But it was a tough street. And my dad, told me stories about the year. Saw a guy on the corner billing second. Somebody took one of those Parker blades and ripped his head off. So it was tough. So white people really didn't want to walk down the street. And of course, if you were on Bill, you walked down that street, you got hustled by everybody. Everybody stood out in front of the stores. They tried to pull you in the store to sell you something. So it was a tough street, and it was pretty tough. So white young kids didn't walk down there. And I'm going to tell you a little story. I'd like to mention some names on Beale Street, because you're talking, we're here at the Jewish Community Center. There's so many. Beale Street was a Jewish street. It was like Little Italy in New York, or Chinatown, San Francisco. It was a street for the blacks, and it was run by really a lot of Jewish merchants. And I'm going to start off at the beginning of the street was, I know some of y'all remember the M&M building, Merchants and Manufacturers building. It's not there anymore. It's on the corner where Memphis Light, Gas, and Water was. But this building was owned by Philip Bells. And this was where Elvis went, and when he signed up for the Selective Service, this is where he went. Traveling down a few doors, 107 Beale Street was Reuben Cherry. Reuben Cherry's Home of the Blues record store. And a lot of us in here think that the only record store in town was Pop Tunes, but Home of the Blues was the original record store. I mean, it was probably the finest place to buy blues records from here to Chicago. A young Willie Mitchell worked there. I read something that he might have been a producer. I didn't know if Mr. Cherry did some producing or anything, but Willie Mitchell was owned High Studios, Royal Studios. He discovered Al Green, so he did a great job. But Elvis bought his records there. Johnny Cash, they all bought their records there. And in the 1992 Acceptance Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, Johnny Cash, of course, he gave a shout out to Lansky's, but he also gave out a shout out to Reuben Cherry, the Home of the Blues record store. And Johnny Cash sang a song about the Home of the Blues, record store. So that's pretty good. Johnny Cash, Elvis talked about two Jews on Beale Street. So anyway, There's another guy named Art Hudkins. I know probably people know him, but he was in Partners. I think his brother-in-law was Leo Brody. I think Sidney Middleton's out here. So Leo Brody, after he worked at the hardware store on Bill Street, he moved. He opened a Trojan Luggage Company, and Trojan Luggage Company was one of the first people to sell licensed Elvis Presley products and luggage and that. So that's three people with. Besides the Lanskys that had Elvis connection. But I want to, and I think Phyllis, maybe one time, wherever you are, Phyllis, it'd be awesome to do the Jews on Bill Street. I don't know if you might have already done it, Jews on Bill Street, but I just want to name, what's that? Next year. Next year, okay. I just want to name a few people, and everybody knows the Swabs. Of course, Swabs are not owned by the Swabs anymore, sorry to say. Wyman Jewelry, Nathan Novick, Pawn Shop, Charles Raphael is dead, in that store. Saffron Stones, everybody knows our beloved Milton Kaplan, who's no longer with us, Uncle Steike. Cohen's Loan Office, Lipman's Loan Office, I think Randy Fisher's dead, worked there on Bill Street, and Capital Loan, the Frank Can family, American Loan, my Uncle Joe Krasner. Julius Lewis started on Bill Street. Bert, the Borglum brothers, how philanthropic they've been in the Jewish community. So it's a lot of stories. Goldsmith's Department Store started on Bill Street. Vogue's Beauty Supply, ran by Irvin Lansky, which is now Ampro, is one of the largest suppliers of African American beauty products. Probably, I know it's in the nation, probably in the world. And Vogue Beauty Supply, along with Lansky, are probably the only two people that I know are still in business today. Swabs is, but they're not owned by the same people. So anyway, so Bill Street, oh my God, I can tell you memories. But when I walked in here, I was talking to Charles Clockwide and somebody else, Mr. Franklin, Alvin Franklin, and they brought back flashbacks to me because, being a young kid, I grew up on the street, and oh God, I can't tell you how many times I've heard this, how your dad sells clothes to Schwarz's, how your dad, somebody comes in the store, and he wants a blue suit, he said, hey, turn on the blue suit light, all this stuff. How many times I've heard him say, I'll talk about when they put the African Americans on a piece of cloth, and they mark the cloth. They make the African Americans lie down on the swatch on the material. So I've heard it all. So at the end, I'll tell you what goes around comes around. Okay, so Brian, can you switch it up? Okay, I just want to show you this picture because in our store we've had a lot of different diverse companies. We're in the Peabody now, and a lot of people don't know our real roots, but we sold clothes to African Americans, and we sold clothes to dandies, gamblers, pimps, gospel preachers. We sold clothes to everybody. So they say if you were African American if you were African American on a Saturday night, you wouldn't want to go back to being white, but I can't tell you the crowds we would get in that store on Saturday night, because Saturday night was the happenings, and the store was really, really packed, and they dressed to the nines. So this just want to get you a little flavor of this. A lot of times they said to my dad, a lot of times after school, we had somebody take us to the store. We would stay there till my parents would leave late at night, and they said, "What's your hours?" And my dad said, "Hell, what hours? If there were customers, we'd be here." So customers all the time. All right, this is where I'm going to start off. This is a reenactment. A young kid looking in the windows on famous Bill Street, and like I said earlier, white kids especially didn't walk on Bill Street. But one day, my dad saw this young man looking in the window. He said, "Come on in, young man, let me show you around." And this timid young man said, "Mr. Lansky, I don't have any money, but one of these days I'm going to come in and buy you out." And my dad said, "Young man, don't buy me out, just buy from me." And that's what started their lifelong relationship. Elvis shopped with us all the way to his death, and Elvis was our unbelievable goodwill ambassador. So they had, they said, Elvis, where do you get your clothes? Lansky's on famous Bill Street. So, okay, at that time, Elvis worked around the corner. He was an usher at the Lowe's Theater, and he gets paid every week. And he'd come in one week, he might buy a pair of pants for $1.95, or a shirt for the next week, a shirt for $2.95. So he started coming in every week, and you can change it up, right? Yeah. So this is one of my most favorite photos. I love this photo. It's just little terrain. There's just two standing there. It's just awesome. But Elvis was, he was a Southern gentleman, and he always, said yes sir, no sir. And one day my dad said to Elvis, Elvis, don't call me Mr. Lansky, call me Bernard. Call me Bernard. And so Elvis kind of looked up again. He said, Mr. Lansky. He said, yes sir, Mr. Lansky. So here in the South, he was a Southern gentleman. He was always polite, and it just, like I said, a picture's worth 1,000 words, and this is cool. Right. All right, this is Dewey Phillips. Dewey Phillips was a crazy disc jockey that played Elvis' first record. He was in the store all the time, and in that day they did a lot of remotes from the store. And at that time, our RKO or WHBQ charged $8 a spot. That was a lot of money, but that was Elvis and Dewey, and the musical Memphis was themed after Dewey Phillips. Dewey always used to say, tell them Dewey sent you, put it on your running account. When they catch you, you can pay them. You run, switch over. This is another photo of Elvis, probably during that same photo shoot of Elvis in the story. I mean, the guy looks awesome, and Elvis probably at that time was probably 18 years old, something like that. Brian, you want to switch again? Yeah, okay. This is another one of my favorite photos. This is me. I finally grew into my big ears. This is Elvis in the store, and there was a lot of lost moments through the 50s and 60s because at that time the only people who had cameras were professional photographers. So nobody has cameras. Everyone in here has a camera now. So this is my sister niece Bells. I see Mr. Malkin out here. This is his niece, Kathy Malkin. This is my aunt, Mildred Lansky Krasner. And I want to tell you a short story. One day, probably early 60s, late 50s, early 60s, my dad and mom took my sister and I out to Grayson. So we were in the piano room, and I don't know if y'all remember, but something sticks out in my mind in the late 50s, early 60s. When your parents went to Florida, they always brought back a stuffed crocodile or alligator. I don't know, maybe it just sticks in my mind. So Elvis had a stuffed crocodile on the piano. So he was playing the piano. My sister was sitting next to him, and then all of a sudden, ho! And he scared the hell out of my sister, so he made her cry. So Elvis has made a lot of young girls cry, but he's really made my sister cry. Another thing, I told you nobody really had cameras back there, and y'all will recognize the name Ernest Withers. Ernest Withers was a photographer. He really chronicled the African American civil rights movement in the 60s. I mean, if you see all the photos of Martin Luther King laying in the casket and all those photos, Ernest Withers has taken them. But Ernest Brothers always told my dad, I can remember it like it was yesterday, Mr. Lansky, if I would have listened to you, I'd have been a millionaire, because my dad always thought, Ernest, get down here. Elvis is on his way. Elvis is on his way. And he rarely came to take the photos. Yeah, he could have been a really millionaire. Okay, so September 9th, 1956, I've heard Mr. Bruckner, I heard flash talking about giving Elvis credit, but Elvis came in one day in the store and he said, Bernard, or Mr. Lansky, I'm going to be on a national TV show. He said, great, Elvis, which one? He said, the Ed Sullivan show. So my dad was showing him clothes on my dad, and even me in the store, we lay out stuff, and we go nuts, lay it all out, and Elvis said, Mr. Lansky, I got a problem. What's your problem, Elvis? I don't have any money. So, oh my God, you have a problem, Elvis. So I did loan him money for this gig right there. And it's September 9th, 1956. When it aired, of course, Ed Sullivan aired on Sunday night, and when my dad watched it, at that time, he really knew that this young kid was awesome. Because before that, being in the sales department, if somebody wants to buy clothes, man, we'll tell you how great you are, and tell you how good you are, how good you look. But at that time, he knew this guy was destined to start. And back then, Elvis didn't have a lot of money, so this coat, 3 years later, when Elvis was inducted into the service, or when he went off to serve, he was wearing the same coat. So nowadays, your rock stars will wear something once and they'll end up in a hard rock in Saudi Arabia or somewhere. All right. Got next one, Brian. Okay, this right here is around 56, and this was kind of like a press release selling Elvis merchandise. We've been selling Elvis merchandise for over 60 years. Probably, I would think, the longest company to sell Elvis memorabilia. And that's my dad on the left. Of course, that's Elvis. I really don't know who these other guys are, but my dad told me at one time. But these watches right here, I'm pretty sure that this memorabilia was from Shimmy Alabaster, so there's another Jewish connection there. Alabaster originals. So that's late 50s right there. We'll change it. Okay, my mom is in the audience. This is my mom. But this photo just came to light last year. This photo has been in a drawer for over almost 60 years. And when I found it late last year, I said, oh my God, it's like somebody giving me winning the lottery. I couldn't believe it. So, it was unbelievable. This was in the store. My mom, Elvis at that time was 25 years old because on the edge of the photograph was 1960. So Elvis was 25 years old. Elvis just got out of the service. Elvis just bought Graceland, I think, 2 or 3 years ago. And he was still shopping with us. My mom, I won't tell you how much she was, but this is an awesome photo. I don't know if you can see it, but on the side, we always put, when celebrities or musicians were in the paper and stuff, we always put their press releases on the walls and stuff like that. So, this photo is from 1960. Brian. Yes, this is just another item, a photo with Elvis shopping store. That's my dad on the left, fan in the store. Elvis was signing autographs, and there's a better picture of Celeste on the wall or coming in shopping with us. And I tell you, it's a crazy story. My dad always told me when they first started out, my dad used to call his suits and stuff. My dad used to love to trim the windows. He used to call the clothes he put in there his lifesaver colors, because he puts in oranges, reds, yellows, just the colors from the lifesaver. So he told me that the merchants on Beale Street thought the Lansky Brothers were crazy. He said they would never make it; they would go out of business. So 72 years later, we're still hustling. All right, next step, right? Oh, there you go. This is my dad flipping Elvis' collar. There's not a day that goes by that somebody doesn't come in the store and want their collar flipped like Elvis. And of course, we like to take credit for the black and pink color combinations of the 50s, flipping the collars. And anyway, that's yours. And that's Elvis. So wind this thing up, I want to talk about two things, and it's, I guess it's, my wife Jerry right here, we got married in June, I think, was it, Jerry? Elvis died in August, so, all of us have made many Shiva calls throughout our lives, but Jerry and I, my mom and dad, made the ultimate Shiva call, and it's the first time my wife Jerry saw Elvis in the box. My dad would say he was there, too proud to speak, all dressed up, nowhere to go. It was unbelievable. Dad always said he put his first suit on Elvis and his last suit, and getting back to selling clothes to Schwarzes throughout the years. My dad, I kind of, as a young man, I kind of felt, I had some friends that dads were attorneys and lawyers, and my dad just sold clothes to African Americans. So when my dad died, his obituary was in over 150 newspapers around the world. It was in the Saudi Arabia newspaper. Talked about my dad. We're Jewish, so my dad and our business. My dad's paid his dues for many years, and my dad is known throughout the world because of his acquaintance with Elvis, and so we're blessed. And our 15 minutes of fame is still ticking. Thank you.
And I'll sort of be last, I guess, except for I think Diane's going to speak after this. But when it gets to the Elvis associations and the Elvis Jewish and all the other things like that, Judy and I, my wife and I, and my family have, well, that's not true. I've been collecting stuff a long time, and they've been along for the ride. They have called me crazy, and I know that when they do bury me and they're shoveling the dirt over in the box, on top of the box, that my kids are going to be standing there saying, "Why didn't Dad just collect baseball cards?" But as a little bit of a sample, there's a variety of things over on the wall which you're welcome to look at. And I'll kind of run down the thing, because if you look at the two jackets are sort of iconic periods in Elvis's life. The first on this end is the tan jacket that he was wearing in Las Vegas in 1957 when he went there and performed the first time and bombed. And the photograph in there is with Elvis backstage with Sammy Davis Jr. And we actually have a postcard at home that Elvis wrote to Dewey Phillips saying, "You better hurry up and get out here because they're going to fire me." And the fact of the matter is, he didn't fit the Las Vegas mold. But the jacket, if you look at it, has the Lansky tags in it. Again, it came from Lansky's. As you move on down the table, there's a watch that's sitting there that's next that has a cross and a Jewish star in the face of it. And you have to sit and watch it, because for 40 seconds it's black, and then for 20 seconds the face changes. That watch was designed by Marty Lacker. Marty was in the house one day and doing some sketching and drawing, just sitting at a table, and Elvis happened to walk up and see it. And so what are you doing? He saw the drawing. He said, "Oh man, I like that." He said, "You need to go find somebody to do something with that." And so Marty went to Harry Levitch, who was his personal jeweler for 15 years until they moved out to Peabody. And they put together the watch that you see there. They made 24 of the watches and gave it to the insiders, if you will. And the fact of the matter is those who got it considered as considerably rarer or more significant than the TCB, which sort of became Elvis's moniker, because Elvis gave them to everybody. And these watches, there were only 24 of them, and one of them is sitting there. The next is the pink and black shirt, which again is the Lansky's, whatever you want to call it, model, style, image, that they put Elvis into, and it became his identifying trademark all throughout his career, even in the later days with the jumpsuits and the bling and everything else. It was still the little southern boy with the unusual clothes from Lansky Brothers. The next piece is the genealogy or the lineage, if you will, of Elvis, and whether or not he is Jewish. It's actually written out there that his great-great-grandmother, as I mentioned, they had a daughter. They were practicing Orthodox Jews. They had a daughter who married another practicing Jew. They had a daughter, Octavia, who married Robert Smith, who was non-Jew, and they had a daughter, Gladys, who was Elvis's mother. So at least a lot of it, that's And you'll see that he's wearing, in the pictures on there, a cross, a high in one picture and a Jewish star in the other. The story is that later in his career, and he started wearing these things, and Charlie Hodge or one of the guys asked him, why are you supposed to wear this stuff all the time? And his answer was, I don't want to miss out on going to heaven on a technicality. so all the guys began to call them his technicality necklaces. He would change them back and forth. But beside that, you will see a Jewish star on a chain on the thing like that. That Jewish star was given to Alan Fortas, again, one of the Jewish guys in the mafia. And the story was that Alan was at Graceland one day and walked around the corner or whatever, and Elvis was sitting on the couch or something anyway, and he had on a Jewish star, and Alan looked at him and said, I'm Jewish too, meaning, now we're both Jewish like that. And Elvis started laughing and didn't say a word, got up, walked around behind him, took the necklace off, put it on his neck, and turned around and walked off, and never said another word about it or anything else like that. But the star actually came from Elvis's neck to Alan Fortas' neck to over there on that table. The next piece, as you go on down, there's a jacket it's a famous photo with the $1 Million Quartet, if you remember, Elvis and Johnny Cash and Carl Perkins and Jerry Lee Lewis all posed for a series of photos at Sun Studios. And the Robert Johnson, who was the reporter, named them the $1 Million Quartet, and it became sort of a symbol of the whole Sun thing, if you will. But the tan jacket that he's wearing in that is actually tan suede, and it also came from Lansky Brothers. Again, the Elvis style suede jacket back in those days was out there. It was off the charts. I couldn't bring the jacket today because it's on loan to Graceland. Graceland has it on display in their Sam Phillips exhibit right now, so I'll throw down the bottom. Sorry for the disappointment. But the fact of the matter is, it did come from Lansky's. It was suede, and it was a cool thing back in those days. The next piece is the contract, the sales contract for the Circle G Ranch. And you're going to learn some more in a little bit about some plans that are supposed to happen at the Circle G. But that was a ranch down in Mississippi that Elvis bought for the guys to hang out and get away from everything and everybody, and ride horses and mess around, if you will. The unique thing about it, if you look at it, besides the contract, and it's actually signed on the back, you can't see the back of it, but the price was $437,000, which back in those days was pretty stout. And whether or not the price was $412,000 and Elvis added $25,000, or it was $425,000 and Elvis added $12,000, George Klein wasn't sure, but George told me the story that when Elvis finally decided he was going to buy the ranch, it was in the middle of the afternoon one day, and he called the guy up and he said, I tell you what you do, I'll make the price a total of $437,000, but you've got to leave everything in the house or whatever it was, and all the equipment, all the animals, and all the everything, and you also have to be out of there by 7 o'clock tonight because I'm having a party there tonight. And so if you look at the piece of paper, if you look at the document, up on the side is a little rider that went along with the contract, and it lists all of the furniture and all the animals. He had peacocks and stuff like that, and Elvis made him leave everything there. But, for $25,000 or whatever it was in Elvis, that's usually the way it works. The last piece on the table is the red jacket down there, and again, if you look at it, it's got the Lansky tags, and it was, again, suede. It was kind of, cool imagery. And actually, it got used as the photo shoot that featured the jacket, if you will, featured Elvis wearing the jacket. Got used for the cover page for Jailhouse Rock and a variety of photos, and it became a pretty popular thing, magazine photos and everything else. The point being, again, it was cool, it was suede, and it had Lansky's tags in the back of it. So that being said, you're welcome to look and enjoy the stuff we do. Judy and I kind of get a kick out of playing with the stuff a little bit around our house and our family and whatever. So, and like everybody, I have some Elvis stories or whatever. Dad actually played football at Humes High School. He was a couple of years older, and behind Elvis, but he was really better friends with the Red West. And I like to tell the story that one day Dad and I were walking downtown, and A Stutz pulls up in front of the courthouse, and I had been riding. Dad had gotten his divorce, and we were married, and Dad was sort of single, for whatever it's worth, for a few minutes anyway. And the Stutz pulls up, and I go, Dad, we were right across the street. The blood bank was at the corner of Poplar and 3rd Street, and this was at the courthouse. we were walking around. And anyway, the stuff pulls up. I'm going, Dad, that's it. That's the car I want you to get. You need to get that. It'll be a great magnet since you're single now, you know. When you get through with it, or give it to me. It'll be a great hand-me-down. And he's like, you know, okay, fine, whatever. And all of a sudden, the doors open up, and Elvis steps out of one side, and Red West steps out of the other. Now, what does my dad do? He goes, "Hey, Red!" Everybody in the world would go, "Hey, Elvis," except my father, but he knew Red from playing football at Humes. And so for the rest of his life, I teased him about the fact that he thought Red West was more important than Elvis Presley. The other side of this thing is the Jewish ties to Elvis, and the fact is that when Gladys was buried at Forest Hill Cemetery, the footstone, and there's a photo of it there, that Elvis designed actually had a Jewish star on the Star of David on one side and a cross on the other. And there was a tremendous, you can call it referencing to, or attention paid to over the course of the years to the whole Jewish tie into Elvis's family. And then when Elvis died and they moved they had the trouble that they had with the cemetery, moved all the gravesite and everything back to Graceland. Then one of the greater anti-Semites of all time, Colonel Parker and Vernon together, they decided that they wanted to take the Jewish star off and just have a cross up there, if for no other reason than the fact that Elvis was selling more gospel records than he would have ever sold to the Jewish psalmist. So they weren't that many recorded, but it got lost in the process. But there are photographs over there that you can see that again show the significance of these two Elvis at the time. And with that, also the mafia guys. I mean, George Klein was one of the mafia guys, and Marty Locker was one of the mafia guys, and Alan Fortas was one of the mafia guys. Even a guy like Larry Geller, who was a little weird, but that was one of the mafia guys. But the point being that there was a tremendous Jewish tie through Elvis to Jews and Judaism and whatever. And even there's a story that Barry Weiser used to tell that I think he got a little bit wrong about the fact that when the center was remodeled at one time, they went to Elvis to make a donation, and then he gave $10,000 to the building or the senior room, and Barry would tell the story that it was in honor of his mother. The fact of the matter is, I believe that it was actually in honor of Mayor and Pauline Fortas, who were Alan Fortas' parents. It didn't have Elvis's parent mother, it was named. But that's all right. The story sounded good, and Barry always told lots of stories. That's one more. And the other thing is that there's a story that bubbles around that, in fact, and he supported all the Jewish charities. Elvis used to put an office in the Sturry building, and every charity in the city around Christmas time would go up there, and he would write them religiously $1,000 check. And if you did the tour at the old Graceland, they had a plaque on the wall that was half the size of the screen right there. It was nothing but checks. And they reached for $1,000, and it was what else we had around to every charity at Christmas. And one of the stories is that they went to the Hebrew Academy folks went to Elvis to ask him for a donation, and they asked him for $1,000. And the fact is that he gave some multiple of that. The story goes anywhere from $10,000 to $150,000, and nobody knows for sure what it is, in case Larry or somebody yelling doesn't know the real answer. But it was considerably more than even what they asked for when they went to it. Point being, Elvis had always in his life and over the years had a tie to the Jewish community and to Judaism in general, and we all miss it. I mentioned before that we all have stories. I'm sure everybody in the audience has got some encounter or some person or some story of some kind of how Elvis touched or was a part of their life in one way or another, and it speaks for itself. The man was quite a legend and quite a person. And you may have seen it on TV right now. There's this HBO special, Elvis the Searcher. If you haven't, you should watch it. It's a two-part thing. It's like 3 hours long, so go record it or do whatever. But you should watch it because it does a lot to dispel the weaknesses or the bad parts of Elvis, his stress, the music, and his talent, as opposed to the drugs and whatever else. So, at this point, we're kind of open this to the floor, guys. If you have questions or anything, we want to do that. I know we're going to false alarm. Dan, they didn't give me a bio For those of you that don't know, the Unknown Child Foundation is going to be putting a permanent memorial to the children that were lost in the Holocaust that were identified. There's some information back there on the back table. I should know more about it than I do, but I promise I'm going to learn about it. But at this time, Diane Camille is going to give you a little bit of background about what their group does and the hopeful soon, but the memorial that's going to be built. And so, ladies and gentlemen, I give you Diane.
This is a pleasure, and I'm so thankful that the Jewish Historic Society decided to include us, and because we really do have a little bit of a Elvis connection, and it doesn't make any sense to have a Holocaust memorial to the children that died in the Holocaust connected with Elvis Presley, but we think it's pretty special, and I'm so glad to tell you the story. I would like to just introduce you to a couple of people real quickly. Would the board please stand, board of directors, and we're limited. Susan, that's my husband on my right, Susan Howell in the middle, and Susan's husband Chris on my left, and Susan is the one who started this with her students, Horn Lake Middle School. She was teaching Holocaust and wanted the kids to know about that and have a project. Most of her children had never heard of Holocaust, and so they accepted a project to collect 1.5 million pennies for the 1.5 million children that died in the Holocaust. And that was in 2009, fall of 2009. We're still working on this. And I want to go ahead and introduce another person. Doug Thornton, would you please stand? Doug is actually an advisory person on our board, but he is the brain, the brilliant brain behind this memorial. He's designed the permanent memorial, and we're going to talk a little bit about that, but he's incredible. And then I want to introduce Buddy Runnels. Buddy, would you stand? Buddy owns the Circle G Ranch now, and do you sing, Buddy? Can you do an Elvis impersonation or anything? Never mind, Buddy. He is a great guy. Oh my goodness, he is the best. And I hope y'all will speak to them before you leave. But the connection is that we had all the pennies. They weighed over 8,000 pounds, over 4 tons. We had them all. It took 3 years to collect them, and we had them all in storage. We also had a sculptor from Israel, Rick Winnicky, to design and make for us a sculpture of a faceless child in the ovens of Auschwitz. And the door is an exact replica of the door in Auschwitz. And he incorporated pennies in this. We have all the pennies. He did not melt our pennies. We still have the 1.5 million pennies. But we had all of these, and we were looking for land. And we had a couple of people to offer us land. But our primary thing was security. It has to be secure. It can't just be anywhere. We don't want anybody to come in and destroy it, but it had to be secure. And we looked several places. Like I said, a couple of places offered to us. And one day my husband said to me, he says, I'm going to make an appointment with Bill Brown, who is in DeSoto County. And he said, we're going to go, he's a commercial real estate agent, we're going to go talk to him. So we go to Bill Brown's office, and we're talking to Bill Brown, and all of a sudden I see over in the corner a map of the state of Mississippi, and there's a star up there in the northwest corner. And so they're talking business, and it's over my head, but I'm watching that star on that map. And so they get through everything, and they discuss what we need to do next, and so on and so forth. And so I asked Bill Brown, I said, Bill, tell me about that map over there in the corner. And he said, oh, that's the Circle G Ranch, and that's what that star is. He said, a new person, Buddy Runnels, just recently bought it, and he's going to develop it, and it's going to be a family-friendly place. And as a matter of fact, Buddy's got some layouts he can show you. There's going to be horseback riding. It's going to be things that that it's going to be museums, and when he said museum, you know, my mind went off. And so he said all those things about it, and I said, can you get us an appointment with Buddy Reynolds? And he says, well, I'll see what I can do. And I can't remember exactly how it came about. So Ken and Doug Thornton, the architect, and I met Buddy and his right-hand man, Dave Stewart, one morning at their hotel. And we were sitting there, and all of a sudden, there were all these students everywhere. I mean, we couldn't even hardly move. There were just students everywhere. They had busloads of students. And so it dawned on me that they were on a field trip, and I thought, this is what we want. We want the world to come to see our field trip. But also, the Circle G Ranch, I knew it belonged to Elvis. Also, y'all, it didn't escape me that Graceland touts that they have 600,000 visitors a year. And I kept thinking, I want those 600,000 visitors to come see the unknown child. I want them to see this. So I'm really intrigued in this property, at this property. We had a great meeting. Oh my goodness. Buddy is such a gentleman. He loved the unknown child. He didn't know about us. He didn't know anything about us, but he loved it. And he said, I think this would be a perfect fit on our property, and we would really like to have you on our property. And so, of course, we had a lot to work out, but that was a good initial visit. And so then we go home, and now that property just haunts me. There's just something about the property, and I couldn't let it go. I wouldn't let it go. I was driving my husband crazy. And so one day I was sitting at the kitchen table, and I was writing, and he was in his office, and he came in there, and he had printed off a piece of paper, and he handed it to me. And he said, I think this is what's disturbing you. And he says, I think this is the missing piece to the puzzle. And I looked at it, and I saw that Elvis was Jewish. And I'm going, oh my goodness. So a Jewish man on this property that we're looking at to put on this property about the children that died in the Holocaust, this is perfect. And I knew that Elvis was a good man, and I've been told many times that he loved children. And as a matter of fact, in something that Mamie Clemens wrote, she said, I think this would be an incredible tribute to Elvis Presley if he knew that he could have this on his property. And so when we got that and realized that it was the perfect place, then that's what we're pursuing. And but I saw one thing on the internet. After Ken brought that to me, then I started just cramming, reading all that stuff. Somebody said something, and I'm so sorry that I cannot go back to that page. I've tried. I can't find it. If any of y'all know who said this, I would love to know. But I read there that somebody said that they wished that Elvis could have in his death what he was denied in his life. And what they were implying was the right to be free, to be Jewish. And I kept thinking about our 1.5 million children, how that's actually what we feel like, is we wish that these children could have in their death what they were denied in their life. And that is to have a voice to speak. And I have to tell you, what Doug has created is unbelievable. He's created a Star of David walls, huge, enormous, because you have to be that big to hold 1.5 million pennies. And he's created that. And I want to tell you a little secret. As I was pondering all of this, those children were made to wear the Star of David in their lifetime as a badge of shame, as of dishonor, and just to make them feel less than they were. Well, in this memorial, he's designed these huge Star of David walls that will, in honor, great honor, wear them. And they will be all on those Star of David walls. And that's what I saw in that corner, was that star on that map. And y'all, there are two pieces of materials back here on this back table. Please come by and pick these up. This tells about our exhibit. We have a traveling exhibit. And it was in DeSoto County for 6 months. It's now going to be on the square in Collierville with the Bible Museum for the next 6 months. And please pick these up and come see and come visit and help us tell the story of the children that died in the Holocaust. There's somebody else I want to recognize. With the Turner family, please stand up. I just saw it. Stand up. Don't shake your head no with me. And this is, Denise was with the homeschool group of kids that joined after a year of Susan starting it. And her children have supported this like you cannot imagine. And so that whole family is still, the homeschool kids are still working for the unknown child. So thank you for all your
If you've got any questions or anything, the guys at the table, we've got microphones. Flip the switch.
Yes.
Okay. So, any questions from the field, stories to tell, or questions to ask any of the I guess panelists, again, if nothing else, a special thanks to Diane Bucker, the incredible lawman. David's a member's institution. You have no idea, but back in his day, he was more popular than Justin Timberlake or any of those other things. And Lansky, what would Memphis be without Lansky? Without Lansky, and especially thanks to the ladies who are coming up here, but to Phyllis and Lorraine, they're the ones that hoodwinked us into this and occupied your day. But if there are any questions or anything we can help with or answer any questions, we'd love to. Otherwise, I'll turn it back over to the hosts.
Thank you, Mayor. Okay, there are a lot of people we have to thank. This is the last, as you know, the last program for this year. We want to thank Larry Moss, Hannah Proctor, Hal Lansky, David Flashman, and Diane McNeil. But mostly we want to thank Elvis, because there wouldn't be a program without him. This year we have been here at the Jewish Community Center, so we want to thank Jeremy Weiser and Shelley Ostrow and Marcy Stagner for their help throughout the year. Brian Paris, where are you? Thank you for stepping in and helping us out. He did all of the text. Also, the Jewish Historical Society Committee, Francine Brown, Nancy Ravenue, Jackie Mandel, and Mimi Clemens, and Sarah Beth Silverman. I'm sorry. But and we'd also like to thank all of you for coming and making this year. It was pretty special. Thank you. Hal's books are back. Hal Lansky's books. This is Lansky Brothers by Hal, and we have a children's book. Come on in, young man. By Hal and his daughter Julie. And they're back there.
Sarah Beth has a few DVDs from the history of Jewish Memphis and membership forms and anything else about the Jewish Historical Society.
Thank you.